Mom, Dad, I just have to say, it breaks my heart watching you stress over dinner every night. This year, I don't want you doing the fridge stare down. Hot take, with the new Blue Apron, eating healthy is easy. They've got pre-made and one-pan meals with plenty of balanced nutrition. No subscription needed. You could be plating like a chef instead of negotiating with leftovers. Make it your healthy, tasty, and easy 2026 dinner resolution. Just saying.
Get 50% off your first 2 orders plus free shipping with code LISTEN50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
I'm back from my travels. I've spent the last 10 days or so in the States, so I'm back in Blighty, which is very nice because it was very cold where I was.
Did you do any scouting?
I did not. I actually did not see any sport of any kind. I do try and catch sport, and if I can. I mean, I'm abroad a lot, and sometimes there's sport that coincides with that, and I do go and see it if I can, but there wasn't anything this time. I just had to enjoy -9 in New York. That was cold.
Yeah, that's cold. I'm sure there are people listening to this in places where that's like, a warm, balmy spring day.
Well, I did have someone tweet me. I tweeted this out, and he sent me his weather app, which was -22, -23, -24. I was like, right, okay.
Yeah, -9 is, I think, feels pretty darn chilly, though, if you're not used to it.
Most certainly was. I had good fun in New York and then Washington. I hadn't been to Washington for a good 10 years, so it was nice to go there. David Cameron was in town at the same time as me. Nothing to do with me, I have to say. But we crossed paths a few times because we ended up at the same office on the same day. But,
did you boo him?
I did. I didn't see him, so no.
Okay. Were you there when we swore at Norman Lamont outside the Raj pub in Holland Park in the early 90s?
I was not, although we did have this conversation a little while ago about that pub being one of our favourites from many years ago.
Ah, yes. I would say memories, but that's a strong, strong word. Talking of the distant past, I don't think we need to cover the Southampton game, which has been covered in every news outlet all around the world as distinctive, definitive proof that Louis van Gaal is just as bad as David Moyes.
Oh, well, yes. I mean, everyone talked about the points total being 37 after 21 games in both seasons. So, yeah, I don't know. Is the world not waiting for us to give the final definitive narrative on that game? No, probably not.
Here we go. I can do it if it is.
But you can, because I didn't see the game. Normally, if I'm in New York and there's a game on, I head over to Nevada Smith's, or there are a few more bars, actually. They used to be the only place you could go, and they moved into massive premises, and then a few other bars popped up as well. So, anyway, go and tell us what happened.
Manchester United were terrible. So bad. I mean, actually, that is slightly overstating it. And if not for Juan Mata having misplaced his most vital shooting boots, because without them, he hasn't necessarily lit the world on fire. But yeah, apart from Juan Mata missing 2 ridiculously clear-cut chances, United were pretty ponderous, struggled to break Southampton down. Southampton defended very deep, and as you pointed out, Koeman said in the press conference afterwards that he knew that United struggled to build playing 3 at the back. We all know that. It's clearly the case. It's funny because our defence has come in for so much stick this season, but our defence is looking pretty solid.
Conceded less goals than Manchester City now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Southampton struggled to create chances of their own, and United were borderline unlucky, but considering the ridiculous robbery we pulled off when we went to their place, it all evens out in the wash, doesn't it? The big story from that game happened beforehand, though, with Falcao not even in the 18. A slightly peculiar decision, I thought, not to have him on the bench. It wasn't like that space was desperately needed. There were a lot of defenders on that bench.
Van Gaal explained it afterwards by saying that he knew he would have to take some players off because they weren't fit, so he only had room for one striker on the bench and he needed some pace. That was his explanation. So how did Di Maria do up front in that game? Because I tell you what, against QPR, he was rubbish, but we'll get onto this in a bit. What about against Southampton?
I think he was worse, probably. I think he was slightly more effective against QPR. I mean, Gary Lineker was saying it on Match of the Day, and he mentioned it on Twitter too, and I think it's an extremely apt point. Why take a player who's so dangerous with the ball at his feet and put his back to goal? You said right at the beginning of the season, people are assuming that Di Maria will play in the Robben role in the 3-5-2, but he isn't a good fit for that role because that's not the nature of his game, and that certainly looks to be the case. It was very surprising, actually, to see him there again.
It was, well, yeah. Against QPR, he basically played at number 9. I guess slightly deeper against Southampton. You know, having not seen the game, it's hard to pass any comment. I was actually wandering around the 9/11 Memorial Museum at the time, so I thought it was probably inappropriate to try and stream the game, you know, being the sensitive type and all that, so I didn't do that. I did follow on text, though, and Twitter, and there was a lot of people complaining about a lot of things. The biggest thing they were complaining about was the 3-1-6-2-4-9-7-4-2-1 formation, or whatever it was. 3 at the back and then a load of other players in different positions. What do you make of this? It's almost beginning to look like it's stubbornness on Van Gaal's part.
Well, since it's a long time ago and you didn't see the game, we could just shift this conversation a week forward in time to the QPR game, because that lineup was when it started to look like stubbornness. I think against Southampton at home, it was borderline. You know, a lot was made of the fact that Van Gaal very amusingly said, we only have one player injured, can you believe it, in the press conference beforehand. But the truth is, that's actually overstating the case, because we only have one player injured, but we have an awful lot of players without match fitness. And I think he was trying to shuffle his pack in a way that made sense, and that kind of 3-5-2 has slightly become his default crisis mode formation for the whole of this season. And I think, you know, we're still in crisis mode, if you like, or Van Gaal's still in crisis mode, because he's been there a decent amount of time now, but most of that time he hasn't been able to work with most of his players, you know. So anyway, against QPR, there did not seem to be much grounds for playing 3 at the back, because as was very evident when it was ditched and we looked 100 times better in the second half of that game. What did you think? Do you think he's been stubborn? Do you think he's why do you think he's doing it?
Well, look, I think stubborn is a bit of a glib way of kind of describing it, really, because he explained his decision quite clearly afterwards. He said, you know, I know we create more chances when we play with the 4 at the back and the diamond in midfield, but we lack balance. And so what he's really worried about is the amount of chances that United are conceding when he's playing 4 at the back. And I guess part of it is that he thinks that Carrick is not going to do the kind of defensive midfield job on his own, needs some support in there. May or may not be true, and also he's worried about his central defenders in a 2 rather than a 3. He just wants the extra protection. So crisis mode, probably still when he's playing 3 at the back. But it says just as much about his trust for his defenders, I think. I don't think he trusts any of them at all. Probably with good reason, you know, for fitness and quality reasons. So that's why he's sticking with 3-5-2. He thinks he's got more chance of winning games if he's defensively sound than if it's an open game. You know, with the amount of attacking talent United have got, you've got to question that, though, haven't you? You've got to think we'd outscore quite a lot of teams if they were unleashed, and at the moment they're not, and it means that an awful lot of United's play is extremely ponderous, and we're not able to even quicken up the passing, let alone quicken up the tempo of the game. So I'm not sure it's stubborn. I think he believes in this, but it's not working, is it? Because, you know, defeat to Southampton and then 45 minutes of utter dross against QPR. I mean, that was poor. I think I described it as poo when I was texting you, which I thought was extremely mature of me, but much, much better in the second half, of course.
Yeah, I think I've got a few different thoughts on that. One, I think he trusts Rocco, because if you look at all the back fours, basically, pretty much all of them have got Rocco in them. So I think he's the defensive exception to the rule in terms of trust. Another thing is that Greg Johnson of Squawker wrote a really interesting thing about how the players might all be recovering from their World Cup hangover, but it's entirely possible that Van Gaal isn't, and that actually Van Gaal's just tired, you know, and that's one of the reasons that his decision making isn't as sharp as it should be, because he hasn't had a break for ages, and he's been thrust in at the deep end.
I'm not sure I'm going to buy that, but, hey.
Because, mental exhaustion is... if you concentrate for an hour, it's extremely tiring, you know what I mean? It's a tiring thing. I'm not saying it's the only factor, but I thought it was quite a specific and interesting factor. Di Maria was pretty terrible for the whole game against QPR, but he was definitely better after he was used in a position that he's more effective in, playing up front, and Rooney playing in midfield. Not that I think that Rooney would be a particularly good link player in the 3-5-2 as the kind of second link striker or whatever. I don't think he would particularly suit that. But still, you'd think that at least then Di Maria would be playing in his right position. It seemed genuinely quite a bizarre decision.
Yeah. At the moment, Van Gaal is finding it very difficult to get the best out of any of his attacking players. I mean, Falcao worked hard against QPR. I wouldn't say he really produced much. One laughable miss when about 2 yards in front of goal-ish.
Well, no, it wasn't a laughable miss. It looked like a laughable miss until you see the replay and it was taken off his foot by Corker, basically.
Yeah, whatever. He should be moving quicker towards the ball, which is another question mark about Falcao, of course. A little bit ponderous at the moment. The wider point I was trying to make about the attacking players, he's not getting much out of Di Maria at the moment. I mean, he's playing him in the wrong position, I'd suggest. He's not getting much out of Mata, very, very quiet against QPR. And he's not getting a lot out of Rooney. I mean, Rooney did all right. I mean, he was at the heart of many things, wasn't he? He was probably the most involved of any United player in the midfield. But it's been a long time since we've been singing Rooney's praises, and he does it all right in central midfield. Is he ever going to make a world-class central midfielder? I'm not sure he is.
I'm sure he isn't. It would be a huge long shot, right, to think that he's going to suddenly become a proper expert at that position. I think he's been absolutely terrible for about 3 games now. Maybe it's only 2 games, but it feels like a long time. So bad against QPR. But anyway.
The thing was, he got on the ball a lot. Any time he got into the attacking third, it felt like he gave it away. I don't know exactly how many misplaced passes there were from Rooney in the attacking third, but it was a lot. I did see one stat that was going around. United misplaced more passes in the game against QPR than any other team has done in any other game this Premier League season.
Rooney made 18 of his 33 passes in the attacking third, which... I'm no mathematician, but that means basically half the time he had the ball in the attacking third, he gave it away.
Well, there's one solution to that. Don't have him in the attacking third. Or attacking. Or in the team.
The balance of the side was all off. Rooney's out of form again. Probably something of a strop because he's being forced to actually be a midfielder now, and as we know, he likes that for a couple of games and then he gets fed up. And because he's playing really badly, the captaincy thing then goes a bit awry, which is a shame because I felt like he was doing a pretty good job of that, and he's not done anything egregious in that department. But yeah, he's had 2 really bad games in a row. Falcao, at least, he had that chance, 2 chances, the header, which Green did well to save, and then the shot at the near post, which maybe he could have done with being more artful than just kind of blasting it at Green. And I think there's absolutely no blame attached to him whatsoever for the chance that he missed in front of the open goal. I don't think being quicker to get there would have made any difference. Talking of quick, it did change. The game did change when Van Gaal made his substitutions. He brought on big and he brought on quick. It was pretty back to basic stuff. Something which you were calling for, actually. You texted me saying we'd just be better kind of getting right back to basics, and it did.
Yeah, I didn't quite mean lump it.
No, I know,
man. But if you just stripped away all the tactical nuance that Van Gaal is trying to get into his side, the philosophy, and just went back to a straight 4-4-2. I'm not saying that's the formation that will win United the league or anything like that, but in that particular game, when it was a complete mess for 45 minutes, that would have solved a lot of problems just for then, which is not far off what United did in the second half. Not quite, but
close. Yeah.
Yeah, close. Went to a much more traditional formation, and it worked for a while. I mean, I'm not saying United have got the best squad in the league, right? Or even the best 11, but there's a lot of talent there. some definite problems, but a lot of talent. And it's beginning to feel that Van Gaal is not getting the full sum of all the parts. And I don't know whether that's true or not, but if this narrative around the comparing Moyes and Van Gaal's points, has anything to it, and it's hard to compare across seasons and unfair, of course. Then you start asking some questions. Where did that 150 million pounds spent at some 120 odd million net actually go? Has it improved the team as much as it should have done? Where does Van Gaal go from here? Why is he not getting as much criticism as Moyes did last season? Or perhaps he, a better way of putting that, or perhaps that he should, or scrutiny at least. And, all these things I think are valid given United's progress today. And the real kicker is, even if you don't buy the comparison of points totals across seasons, it's probably true that United are fourth only because of how bad Arsenal and Liverpool have been for much of this season. If they hadn't really seemed to drop off, then it might look a lot worse for Van Gaal.
Yeah, and losing to Southampton was crucial, because if we'd won or even drawn that game, we'd be third now, and that is a lot more comfortable, isn't it? Because Arsenal just beaten City and come back into form and all this kind of thing. I mean, you asked a ton of questions there, and I think first of all, Van Gaal is getting a lot of criticism. It's been slow to arrive, but it's arrived in the deluge. I tweeted something positive about Van Gaal ahead of the QPR game, but after the team had been announced, and my mentions were just absolute wash. There are people fully committed to calling him a fraud and a charlatan and a failure and all of these kinds of things already, and I just think there was a very specific reason why I was very happy that United acted quickly on Moyes.
You didn't like him because he was ginger and Scottish?
No, that's neither of those things are the reason. The truth of the matter is, when it was all going a bit Moyes out, and I was like, is this right? Am I just being impatient? Am I joining the throngs of the ridiculousness of modern football? But I went back and I watched a video of Alex Ferguson in 1986 being interviewed about United, and I asked my conscience with a kind of, honest assessment, would this man have convinced you more than Moyes did? And the answer was yes, 1,000,000 times yes. And it's the same with Van Gaal. Fergie very much didn't get things right straight away, and Van Gaal is not getting things right. This is not to say that he doesn't warrant criticism and scrutiny, because he very much warrants both of those things. But when somebody is a serial winner, you back them. You back them for multiple seasons. The reason Moyes never should have been backed for multiple seasons is because he should never have been anywhere near the job in the first place. And you simply cannot say that about Van Gaal.
No, that's fine, but then we come back to this debate about just buying into it, and it's a piece of faith, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it is, because the evidence that isn't there to kind of support what he's doing. I mean, one of the things that's beginning to frustrate, of course, is the amount of sort of players played out of position, square pegs in round holes, and the fact that there seems to be this kind of faith that 3-5-2 is going to work for United, and it just doesn't, or nuances around that, and it just doesn't seem to do that for either for the team or players. You look at the team against QPR, and De Gea and the back three, you'd say might be playing in their natural positions, although I'm not sure that Evans or Jones have played in the back three very often. Carrick is the deep line midfielder, that's about his natural position. And then Falcao up front. Everyone else is in the wrong role for them, or at least the one that they're not the most familiar with. So there's an awful lot of square pegs in that team. And then you ask yourself, is that a bit dysfunctional because of that, as well as the 3-5-2 system, which doesn't appear to have worked for United this season?
And that's absolutely the case, because it was like a classic Fergie game, when he went crazy and started just playing players out of position all the time. And you would see the team sheet and you would know what was coming, and then in the end would probably win. And that's what happened this time as well. It was really a very frustrating game. It was heartening to see him switch the system. Another lovely bright spot was the goals, and obviously they were both good goals. Fellaini's goal, he started the move by kind of a long bomb upfield. He caught it on his chest. He did out on the flanks. He does a beautiful piece of chest control where it's like another player would use his first touch to take the ball away from the defender, but he gets the ball under control and takes it away from the defender to give him space to do the pass with Fellaini's absolutely magic chest, and he took his goal well well, of course.
He should just play football on his knees because he'd get the ball in his chest because he's phenomenal. He's the world's best chesterer of the ball. And I mean, the difference in quality of touch of Fellaini's chest versus his foot is miles. It's divisions apart. It's not even the same sport. But he took his goal very well, got to say. Fine sort of toe-poked finish. Caught it very cleanly in a fine goal. Fine second goal as well. So, obvious to say, but the two brightest points of the game by a long way, those two goals. And nice to see Wilson. I mean, it felt like real natural goal scorer's instinct, didn't it? Bursting through, first shot saved, second shot, beautiful finish.
Yeah, absolutely. And Van Gaal's taken a lot of criticism for his substitution, and I think Aston Villa's substitutions and tinkering really killed our performance. Very similar against Southampton, but both his subs scored the goals in the QPR game, so you've got to give him some credit for that, probably. Wilson, an absolute bright spot, and yeah, fantastic to see him. And it's too early to say he needed that goal, but it's going to do him no harm at all to have got it, is it? Because he's featured quite a lot and he's done an awful lot of very useful running, but it hasn't been end producty so far this season, and it was fantastic to see that, so it was great stuff.
Yeah, I think that's true, actually. I mean, that was something like 12 games this season before scoring, so that does begin to feel like a very long time. And he's a natural. Anyone who's seen a lot of him at under 21 and youth level know that he is the natural goal scorer. He should be scoring more goals. This is not someone who's got an all-round game and doesn't score many, like, I don't know, Welbeck or something like that. This is a player who ought to score a lot of goals through his career, and his pace causes a lot of trouble. So good to see. Hope he goes on from there. He's obviously got to make some adjustments to his game, playing at Premier League level. The movement needs to be subtler, I think. He runs into channels in quite an obvious fashion sometimes, but he'll get there. I have a lot of faith in this kid, and it seems that Van Gaal does too. That's great. One question I had, and when we talk about question of faith, Van Gaal have faith in his creative players? So kind of popped up in my mind because he sold Kagawa. I'm not sure he fully trusts Mata. I mean, he substitutes him a lot. I know he started 10 straight games or something like that before this one, but he comes off a lot. Rooney, is he? I don't know if he's a creative player, but he's certainly not playing in a position that's normal to him. And then Januzaj hasn't featured at all. Herrera barely features at all. It's beginning to feel that Van Gaal, the pragmatist, would prefer sort of bodies in there and physicality than the touch players.
Yeah, which is all a bit of a shame, really, because I feel like we've got a squad that leans heavily in the other direction, haven't we? Januzaj, it was nice to see Fellaini running up and hugging Januzaj after he scored. That was a quite pointed moment, I thought, really. And then Herrera brought on as the sub to waste a bit of time when we were 2-0 up. That was weird. Unless, when he did that with Paddy McNair, it felt like a genuine vote of confidence. This felt like he was just taking a mickey out of Herrera. There are these rumours that Herrera was late for training a couple of times early in Van Gaal's time in charge, and he really didn't like it, and that was why he was out for such a long period of time even after he was back fit. Whatever's happening there, I don't understand it, because to me, that midfield balance, even if you just take out Rooney and put Herrera, or a player I actually like, so take out Mata and put Herrera in there, you've instantly got a better balance, right? Because he can do the defensive work too, and etc.
Instantly, yeah. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, maybe he was late for training because he was shagging Van Gaal's daughter or wife, or both of them. I don't know. I mean, it feels a bit petty, doesn't it? Because it feels like, if that's the case, feels too petty, because I think he'd add a lot to the team at the moment. Januzaj, it's harder to make the case for, because he's not really done much off the bench this season, but he's barely had any time off the bench either, which says a lot too. It's a real shame, and it doesn't seem that there's any obvious loan move coming up either. It got lost in a lot of furore around Falcao not making the squad, but Januzaj didn't make the bench for the Southampton game either. And so, it's gone from not getting any game time to not even being in the squad, because under-21 football is going to do nothing for him at all, nothing.
It's really interesting. I was looking back at the season, and the one time Januzaj was it's even strong to call him a regular, but there was a 3-game run where he played basically a 4-3-3, or even a 4-game run where he played a 4-3-3. It was West Brom, some variation that you could call a 4-3-3, let's say. West Brom, Chelsea, City, Crystal Palace. I think Januzaj played in all of those games, and I don't think he was very good in any of them. But honestly, it was like you could hardly even blame him, because that was at the absolute height of Van Persie not running around. and Di Maria was on the other flank just constantly running with the ball and not passing, and Januzaj is this kid and he's had this great breakthrough season. He's trying to prove himself, so every time he gets the ball in a half shooting position, he's shooting. I mean, the amount of times this season that kid has made the wrong decision with the ball, and you can blame him for that, but it's also really understandable when he's trying so hard to prove himself that there's something not gone right in the management there.
Yeah, it's a real shame because the kid's obviously got a phenomenal amount of talent. I ended up having several arguments with people on Twitter when complaining about Januzaj's lack of game against Yeovil. I mean, it seemed like a perfect game for him to have some time, didn't it? And an awful lot of people ready to write the kid off already. I think that's nonsense. I think he's the best attacking talent that's come out of United in 5, maybe 10 years, in fact. So, if we're going to count that as an academy player, did steal him from another team when he was 16, but, we can sort of count that-ish. So I think it's a real shame that he's not moving on from last season. Phenomenal first season in the team. He's got loads and loads of talent, and he would be a massive asset to United if Van Gaal can get the best out of him and get him in the team.
And it's another one where this thing of faith comes into it. And I know 6 months might seem a long time, but the 6 months that it has been, it's flown by, right, this season. It's been a quick season so far. My experience of it's been pretty quick, and given the sheer number of injuries, it's like you can't use it as an excuse forever. But it's like when a new government comes in, right, and says, and people attack them and they go, look, we had a massive mess to clear up that the last government made. And everyone goes, oh, that's typical politicians, just always blaming the last lot. But sometimes it's true. This country is currently massively suffering because of policies that Mrs. Thatcher put in place, and Ted Heath, and some decisions Labour governments have made too. These things are generational, and Van Gaal's come into a squad that was completely destroyed, brought in a bunch of players, some of whom were his choice and some of whom were opportunistic, and the whole mishmash. He's got this unbalanced but incredibly uber talented squad, and then they all start dropping like flies, and he's got to patch it together and stick it together with glue, and it's not quite working. And I feel like there are so many mitigating circumstances that it doesn't excuse everything that's going wrong, but it is the background to what's going wrong.
Yeah, that's fair enough, yes. He's got no injuries now, though, so there are very few excuses, and hopefully United will head to Cambridge United in the FA Cup on Friday and smash them, because that's exactly what United should do. We'll probably play 3-5-2, though. Anyway, look, we should come on to a preview of that game in a little bit, because there's some other stuff that's happened in between us last talking.
There is, but you just took the point I made and made the exact opposite point, where I was saying that it's the injury crisis might be over, but the impact of the injury crisis isn't over, because he doesn't know the players working as a collective yet. Because he's never had them all together at once. Yeah,
but that doesn't explain the bonkers system that he's ramming down everyone's throat, does it? I'm not having that.
No, it doesn't.
When Ashley Young is your only injury and everyone's wailing because Ashley Young's out, which what Van Gaal was doing on Friday.
To be fair, he is the one that makes 3-5-2 work. So. Yeah, so before we get on to preview the Cambridge game, there's been a lot of Manchester United news in the last week, and we've covered this sort of thing happening at other clubs, and we're obviously going to cover it happening at our club. A very, very, very unfortunate situation occurred where one of Manchester United's scouts has been sacked for making racial comments, racially charged, let's just say racist comments on his Facebook page. According to The Guardian, he claimed that whilst it was his Facebook page, some of the comments that had been made had been hacked and put there by someone who didn't like him or didn't like Manchester United.
Yes, this is Torben Egjar, who does some European scouting, called Eastern European people shit and should be kept out of the country, and lots of stuff along those lines. There was some Islamophobia in there too. So let's not believe any of this nonsense. His Facebook page was not hacked, was it? These were his comments, and United did the right thing. Doesn't half bring a question into my mind though. If a player had said that, if say Angel Di Maria decided to put that all over his Facebook page. How would United react?
I mean, this is the interesting question, isn't it? Because it's easy to do it with the scout, because they're very replaceable. Incidentally, right, the one thing that I would say about this, which is not the key point, because the key points are much more complex than this. If you're going to be a scout, if you're going to hire a scout, make sure they're not massively prejudiced against certain type of people, because that's a terrible thing. It definitely makes you a worse human, but there are jobs where that's not going to negatively affect your job performance, like, say, accounting or something, where there's no human contact. But if you're really prejudiced against certain type of people, you shouldn't be the one in charge of recommending whether certain people get looked at or not. You know what I mean? It's like such a bad quality for a scout.
Yes. I'm not quite sure who hired the chap, but he's out of here, which is a very good thing. And United acted very swiftly. So The Guardian apparently uncovered the comments, put it to United. They convened a panel within a couple of hours and sacked the chap summarily, which is rapidly acted. But I have to say, my cynicism about the world of football stretches to the United boardroom. And I think if this was a player, and thankfully none of the United players have done this, that we'd have had a very different reaction.
But what's interesting is if you think about it as a precedent, now when there is a player that does it, or if there is a player that did similar, they've made it very clear where they stand on this stuff. You know, they're going to look like hypocrites of the worst kind. If they...
And of course, you know, we're debating a hypothetical. I hope Manchester United players are, much better people than this chap who's. United have done the right thing and fired him and, disassociated themselves from him very quickly. Will that have wrecked United's January transfer window planning? Will that £57 million bid for Mats Hummels or whomever not be going in now because our scout is no longer there to broker the deal? Probably not.
Van Gaal's been pretty clear that the club are not interested in making big splashy signings this transfer window, although apparently there was a transfer summit. Is this why David Cameron was in Washington? Is this for Manchester United's transfer summit?
Yes, they were getting Prez Obama on the phone to call up Barcelona and say, we'd like Leo Messi please for 12 packets of fags and some good old British exports
and some. Yeah, that could work. It's not going to work, is it? But yeah, I mean, I don't know anything at all about what is really going on behind the scenes. We're constantly being linked with players, of course, because it's January, and we're mostly being linked with defenders, even though our defence never actually concedes any goals. I'm not saying we don't need defenders, but, But yeah, it's got to the point where I basically don't think anyone's coming at all. But that's not really based on anything.
Well, we'll see. In the final copy of Red Issue, and I thought we should talk about this, they hinted that there was some activity happening. And one thing Red Issue has been very good over the years, Richard Kurt has sort of been on the front line, dig into the stories and managed to get many scoops. And that will no longer be the case because Red Issue has closed.
Yeah, you said on your Twitter account they were big inspiration behind the start of United run.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually going to write a piece about Red Issue for the blog, but then I've been so busy I never actually found time. And now it's too late, but I can talk about them on the podcast. Yeah, I mean, an inspiration because this is entirely fan-driven content. Some of it, the editorial was very high quality over the years, some not quite so high quality. Very mixed bunch of stuff in Red Issue between the puerile and cutting edge journalism, and but it's been an essential part of fandom, I think, at United for a very long time. They've in a way kept the club honest by challenging the business practices of United and challenging the manager on many occasions, digging into player behaviour, digging into the real stories behind the headlines, and it's a sad day when that comes to an end. And in the editorial, in the final copy, they said that football is the bullshit industry and they can't take the stench any longer, which is not that far from the editorial line that we or you predicted would be the case when we spoke about it a little while before.
When they said it was nothing to do with money and that it was a going concern, it was a question of principles. I have very mixed feelings about them. I'm sure they would not care a damn about that piece of information. I think the fact that they they thought that there was no way they could actually keep the club honest is probably at the heart of why that editorial read the way it did. I mean, of course they took to task the type of fans that come to Old Trafford, and it's one thing you can't say about Red Issue is that they're not tribal. They're tribal in a very specific way. But yeah, loads and loads of people will miss them.
I'm sure you don't like the tone of many of their articles, especially when it comes to Scousers. And others, and certainly they've been on the edge in terms of humour for many years. I mean, they ran the Luis Suarez KKK back page a little while back that got copies seized by the police fairly illegally, which was right on the edge of good taste. Funnily enough, shortly before that, I'd said, I'm thinking of running this in United Rant, which was almost exactly the same, and you were like, I don't like that.
I mean, you say it's on the edge of good taste. I think Red Issue would gleefully, happily acknowledge that they were way, way over the edge of good taste, but that was they were comfortable with that. And I think, in fact, it's weirdly timely because issues of free speech and taste and respect and offence are all at the height of the thing. I mean, people involved with Red Issue have done some specific stuff that's been nasty to people I care about, and that's always a shame. But life is not black and white, and they also stood for some things that are very important. My own personal take on it is they also stood for some things which actually aren't important, but some people value those types of things very highly. And the one thing you have to say is that it's a very principled decision they've made. They've just gone, we don't want to be involved with this anymore. We no longer feel that our voice is positively affecting this whole situation, so we're out. There's nothing that can be done. Football's dead. We're just going to stop doing it. And actually that particular thing I can really relate to, because spending so much time talking about, writing about, thinking about Manchester United, it gets pretty soul destroying because of how soulless they are as an entity.
Yeah, well, completely. And I mean, I know we both feel the same way. I guess our outtake from that is to carry on talking about the things we like, which is the actual football, when we like the actual football. And that's not very much over the last 18 months or so, but everything outside of it, I have to say I completely agree with the editorial line in Red Issue. This is a cynical industry, and this club is run by the most cynical of capitalist carpetbaggers who are in it entirely for their own profit. And sadly, there are many fans who don't see beyond the spending, the recent spending, and think suddenly everything's great, and the world of football's brilliant again. And Red Issue took that to task, as if having a good transfer window was equal to a trophy that we used to enjoy. And I completely see that, right? Because there are now far fewer people complaining about the Glazers because they release some of Manchester United's own money to buy players for Manchester United. Wow, aren't they wonderful people after screwing the fans and everyone else for the last 10 years? And then there's the rest of the industry, the cynical marketing, the globalization, the support for racists and murderers and rapists and all of that kind of stuff. And, treating fans not as an important part of a important community resource, but cynically as a customer to be milked for every last dollar. And, so I kind of understand exactly where they're coming from, because football is nothing like it used to be when Red Issue started in 1989. I've still got issue 1 of Red Issue. And it won't surprise you to learn the quality of the juvenile humour that was in issue 1 as well. But football is nothing like it, even if Red Issue tried to do the same thing for the last 26 years.
That's the bit of the spirit of Red Issue that resonates with me deeply. The thing in that editorial that kind of illustrates the bit that I don't like, and again, like, they couldn't care less about that, and rightly so. But the bit that I didn't like is the sneering attitude towards the people that come to Old Trafford. that don't belong to this is what football fans should be like. And then, like, you know, they talk about selfie sticks and half scarves and all that stuff is very obvious, and I'm sure deeply frustrating to people who are kind of passionately involved with the club, to see people who are less passionately involved at the game, especially when it becomes an issue of, like, the people who are passionately involved can't go, and the only people that can go now are, let's just say, half scarf wearing people, but I mean that as a shorthand. You know, they also said, like, it's full of happy clappy families, and I'm like, oh yes, terrible when families enjoy doing things together, isn't it? You know, and again, like, you know, I know what they mean, but there's a sneering tone towards the actual people that come that's like, well, there is actually room for both kinds of fans, but the problem is only one kind of fan is being catered for.
Well, yeah, and I think, I suspect that behind that headline, and I get what you mean there, I suspect it's the frustration at the loss of what football once was, right? Where it was mostly affordable, it was mostly, you know, a similar bunch of guys who went every week and stood on the terraces and enjoyed their team winning and losing. And now it's not that at all. It's now 60 quid for a ticket to sit where some half and half wearing guy with a selfie stick and an iPad, you know, watches along and has probably never been to Old Trafford before, you know, and that's perfectly legitimate for those people to go and do that as a form of entertainment. Of course, you know, I said earlier in this pod, I go around the world quite a bit, and I go to a game of whatever sport I can find when I'm in town because, you know, I like sport. And people like doing that in Manchester United are a big draw around the world. So, you know, completely understand. But yeah, the club markets it to that demographic because, yeah, that's what generates eyeballs for their global sponsorship. They want to globalise because that's, you know, they're a media company now, aren't they? Not a football team. And that's how it generates the most cash. So the Glazers can go and sell off more of their stock on the New York Exchange, which they've done again recently, and pocket all the cash. There you go. You know, it's as cynical as it gets.
And that bit of it is entirely cynical, but the human experience of the people there isn't cynical necessarily. And of course it is for some people, and it's very ridiculous when you see someone filming an entire match just on their iPad, just like it is when you go to a concert and everyone's got their phones out filming. You think, just like, what you're doing here is getting yourself a terribly low quality copy of this event, you know, which would be available in a much higher quality form elsewhere, you know. But anyway, that part of it's ridiculous, but the absolute joy in the faces of people that have travelled all the way around the world to come to Old Trafford and can't believe that they're there, and the thousands of people listening to this podcast who would absolutely love to go to Old Trafford and care deeply about United.
Absolutely, yeah. No, and you know, I completely get it. And actually half our audience is people from overseas, which just tells you something about the nature of Manchester United. It's a global institution and loved by many people around the world, but it's just a very different one, you know. I tell you what, I think the guys at Red Issue should go away and think about it, and maybe they'll feel differently after they've not done it for a while. Maybe they won't. I rather suspect they should go and get themselves a tub of cookie dough ice cream and stick some Taylor Swift CDs on, and maybe it'll all be okay again.
I thought that there was a painful irony to our performance against Southampton, which was very much like the kind of mediocrity that Red Issue would rail against.
Well, it was the kind of mediocrity we had in 1989 when they started, of course.
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, R.I.P. Red Issue. Grief.
Oof. Should we hold a minute of silence for them?
Yeah, let's. Anyway, so the other news, given how upset that Red Issue were that people said that we had a good transfer window last time round, is the transfer window so far a good one, in that since we last spoke, we have in fact given a contract to someone who I'm pretty sure would be in the top 5 best goalkeepers in the Premier League, just to sit on our bench for a laugh. Yeah,
Victor Valdez. I mean, he's such a storied career. He's won like 15 trophies with Barcelona, and Van Gaal, of course, gave him his debut as a Barcelona keeper. He's he's had a brilliant career at Barcelona. I mean, he's always had his critics because the things that he's weakest at are the things that he rarely had to do at Barcelona, which was have a physical presence around the box, and which of course is the exact thing that will get tested if and when he plays for Manchester United, which he could well do against Cambridge, of course. But it's amazing, really, that it says something for him and where he thinks he's at in his career that he's actually accepted an offer, because this is, David De Gea has been outstanding for the last 2 years in his way, and it would take a lot to shift him, you'd think. So it says that, and then the other side of it is that, well, what does this mean about David De Gea? Has David De Gea given the signal that he's unlikely to be signing a new contract?
Well, what do you think? Because obviously, like today's papers on Sundays, we record this, are full of De Gea to Real as if it's a real thing. What's your take on the whole situation?
Yeah, I'd say on the balance of probabilities, I think that's probably likely. I think it may well be that they're finally sick of Casillas. I think De Gea's got to add up a bunch of things. One is, I think he'd like to be back in Spain. His girlfriend's still there, fronting a TV show as well as doing the pop records. And those two are regularly on Instagram, communicating their, deep love for each other and all of that stuff. Sounding like a cynic now, aren't I? And Real Madrid is a big calling for any player, especially those of Spanish birth. I know he played for Atletico, but I think we discussed this a couple of years ago. He's not necessarily a hardcore Atletico fan, not from the inner cities, from the suburbs. So I don't think it'd be a problem for him to go to Real Madrid. And the fact that he's not signed the contract, I'm not sure even one's been publicly offered yet, says an awful lot. When you've got a keeper or a player who's amongst the very best in his position in the world, and 18 months or less than 18 months until his deal runs out and nothing's been done, you got to be worried.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be a big blow to lose De Gea, and I don't want to lose De Gea. That would, I'd be very sad. It would be a real shame. But I'd rather we had Valdez there, if that is going to happen, than Lindegaard. Because at least we've got a competent goalkeeper as a backup.
Oh, yeah, completely. I mean, look, in this season when De Gea's probably saved United, 7 or 8 points or something.
More, maybe. Even.
Yeah, right. Maybe Valdez wouldn't do the same quality of job there. But this is not United losing Schmeichel and replacing him with Bosnich and Taibbi. Right? And no, Barthez came after that. But, it's a high-quality goalkeeper. So if De Gea does go in the summer, Valdez will have had 6 months to sort his life out in Manchester, and he'd be a ready-made replacement and a very high-quality one, of course, But it would still be, United degrading a position, for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because basically anyone would be United degrading a position after De Gea, because he's really, really special. Valdez, it's worth pointing out, an extraordinarily handsome gentleman to add to the many extraordinarily handsome gentlemen currently at United. It's not a particular interest, but it's worth pointing out at some point. I don't know if this is a genuine marketing strategy or not, but we could put together some pretty functional boy bands out of the people that are at Manchester United.
Go on, give us your 5-man boy band.
Well, obviously you have to have Daley Blind in it. I mean, come on. And Valdez straight in there. Falcao, I think, very clearly in there. And then, so I think those three are in a kind of standout class. And then the rest of them, it's a slightly more complicated thing. I think, you maybe get Ashley Young in there, and maybe you could have Di Maria as a slightly funny-looking songwriter one.
I don't know about that. He's a bit, he's a bit funny looking, isn't he?
Exactly, but it's fine. If he can write the songs.
You're trying to say that Wazza wouldn't get in there?
Maybe he would. I'm no.
Well, Juan Mata looks like your songwriting cutesy one.
Yeah,
doesn't he?
Obviously. Sorry. Yeah, how could I possibly have forgotten? And to be honest, you could even go with the 2 goalkeeper thing, because both Lindegaard and De Gea would be in with a shout in the boy band.
There you go. Yeah,
it's got to the point where I think we could put together 2. Anyway, let's move swiftly on.
I gather you've been thinking about this deeply, Paul.
No, this is the first time I've thought about it.
Is it your love of boy band or your love of sweaty men that is the driving force?
Why do I have to choose?
Well, exactly. We're open-minded on this show, so if you're a sweaty male in a boy band or would like to be, send your photo to paul@unitedrant.co.uk.
That's unnecessary, but whatever, I'll forward it on to Pete Waterman.
Very good.
Is he still probably?
I'm not sure. He might be dead, but Simon Cowell is still around.
There we go. That's the one.
Someone who is not going to be getting into a boy band anytime soon or never in his life is Luke Chadwick, who is still playing for Cambridge United. Has not played very much recently, but he is in their squad. And after many, many years with MK Dons, and that's who United will be playing this Friday in the FA Cup. What do you think about this?
So go on then, Ed. Tell me everything you know about Cambridge United, and none of it can include information about John Beck.
Yeah, that's about all I know. Did you know when John Beck was Cambridge United manager, he used to grow the grass taller in the corners and put sand there?
I did know that, as did everyone who listened to the Rantcast before the Yeovil episode.
So what do we know about Cambridge? Well, they still play at the Abbey Stadium. They got promoted last season from the conference in the playoffs, so they are in League Two. Richard Mooney is their manager. He's been around the houses a little bit, Richard Mooney, but he's well known. He's coached at a decent level. Luke Chadwick is in their squad. I know none of their players apart from Luke Chadwick, but they do have a player called Harrison Dunk. And, he's got to be good because that's a great name.
It is a very good name. So how are they doing in League 2 at the moment?
Well, they're mid-table at the moment, just above AFC Wimbledon. So they're doing all right, and they won 4-0 against Newport the other night. So, warming up nicely for the United game.
Yeah, one of the things that's notable about their performance this season, they've got a pretty good goal difference compared to the teams around them. They've scored a lot of goals. They've scored more goals than you have to go all the way up to top of the table Wycombe to find a team that's scored more goals in League One so far this season than Cambridge United. So our shaky defence might be tested somewhat.
Yeah, very good. I mean, it's going to be a cracking atmosphere under the lights on Friday night. 10,000 fans. I'm sure there'll be a full United support as always. I'm looking forward to it. You wait years and years for United to have an away game at a lower league club, and two come along at once.
Yeah, absolutely. And Friday Night Lights, of course, means that we could make loads of Tim Riggins references, which I'll be doing throughout the game on my Twitter feed at UTD Rantcast.
Very good. So, do you have a prediction for this game? United going to smash the U's?
What I really want to happen in this game is for us to play a formation that isn't 3-5-2, and I don't say that as a kind of from a Luddite perspective. I like it that I kind of like the fact that we've even tried to play a back three, but it's been so desperately ineffective that it's not so much that I don't want us to play the formation. I just don't want to play the formation if it means sticking a load of our best players in positions where we can't get the best out of them. So yeah, I think my prediction is going to be a 3-1 win to United because we go with a diamond formation, a bit more of attacking thing. One thing I would like to ask your take on is how many of the fringe players do you think he'll give a game to?
A few. I mean, he made 6 changes from the Stoke game to the Yeovil game, if I remember correctly. So I think it'll be that kind of number of changes. So it would be sensible to play some of the players who need some minutes, of course. Di Maria and Herrera and Falcao, and they probably need some minutes, and a few of the defenders do too. It's starting to get to the point where Van Gaal can't make excuses about lack of fitness, match fitness. Also get a few more minutes, and hopefully Wilson starts the game. It'd be nice to see him play again. Hopefully Rooney doesn't need to play. I suppose Fellaini will probably play because he's not played an awful lot recently, and maybe some of the younger kids will get a game. Will Blackett and McNair play again? Will Pereira play? Will Januzaj play? It'd be nice to see all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see what happens with that on Friday night, and then we'll be back to do a podcast after that. We are going to roll over our Falcao competition because we've just not had enough entries. So get your entries into the Falcao competition. It's to win an absolutely lovely painting of Falcao. I think it's the original painting too. I don't think it's a print, but it might be a print. Anyway, it's lovely either way. So yeah, all you need to do is tweet at one of us or both of us, or just tweet using the hashtag Rantcast. And it may be that one of the entries that's already been submitted will win because there's been some good entries, but we'd like a few more because we'd like to give a few more people a chance at winning this. So just tweet at us with something that you have celebrated as wildly as Falcao celebrates goals.
Very good, and that's to win that Falcao painting from mils-art.com. Some very nice stuff there.
Yeah, fantastic. So if you want to get hold of me between now and next week, you can get me at UTD Rantcast on Twitter, and you can get Ed at United Rant, and you can get both of us on facebook.com/United Rant, as more and more people have been doing. So
a rather lot of people, in fact. A surprising number of people, given that we say every week we're never on there. So we must be to look at the stats. See, this is how vain we are, Paul. We didn't care until people started coming to the Facebook page. Now we care a lot.
Like if you prefer Facebook to Twitter, and you want to put comments about the show or questions and stuff like that, we'll definitely read them and reply and get questions for the show from there and all that kind of thing. If you don't do social networking at all, but you desperately want to get hold of us, cast@unitedrant.co.uk.
What if people on the internet at all and they want to get... Do they have to send a postcard in, Blue Peter style?
Yeah, that could work. I think that's probably as good a way as any. Although, if they aren't on the internet at all, how are they listening to this?
iTunes. Phones. Something.
That's the internet, Ed. I don't know how to break this to you. Talking of iTunes and phones, however you listen to the show, unless you just download the episodes from the website every week, you can definitely subscribe to the show, which would be super helpful to us if you would be so kind as to do that. So you just hit the subscribe button on iTunes, or use one of the many podcast softwares that are available out there.
Very good. And leave us a review. We always like to hear your feedback, even if it's just a complaint about Paul.
Hey! All right, and with that, and also another thanks, as always, to the fantastic producer Tom, who you can follow on Twitter at TeejSound, TEEJ Sound.
Right, and just before we go, head off to our tubs of cookie dough ice cream and pop princesses, and a copy of Red Issue, just to read the old ones again and again with a tear running down our cheek. We've got to predict a result for the Cambridge game. I'm going to go for a thumping 3-1 win.
Yeah, I think I stick with my 3-1. That's my prediction.
All right, see you next week.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.